Hi, and welcome back to this second hour of this free-for-all Friday edition of Focal Point on AFR Talk. Brian Fisher is my name. Glad to have you in the conversation. Had to chuckle this morning. I don't know if you saw the video on it. President Obama speaking out on the West Coast, San Jose, I believe. His teleprompter wasn't loaded, and nobody had given him a copy of his speech. So he was sitting there at the podium with nothing to say because that guy is helpless without prepared remarks. So he was hollering, people, where are my remarks? People are tripping all over themselves, falling, sweating, swearing, trying to get him his prepared remarks. And I just came across a piece of potentially bad personal news. I'm just reading the headlines. New York Times, gray wolves no longer need federal protection, Obama administration says. So apparently, as a gray wolf, I have had federal protection, but now the president is saying gray wolves no longer need that. So apparently it's open season now on yours truly. Now, before we go to the phones, I want to play a couple of quick sound bites. Let's play clip number 3, Rob, if we can. This is a quote from James Sensenbrenner talking with Megyn Kelly, Fox News yesterday. And James Sensenbrenner, he's a Republican from Wisconsin. He's the guy that wrote the FISA Act, the Patriot Act. This is the guy that wrote it. So he knows exactly what it authorizes and exactly what it does not. And here's what he had to say about Obamagate.
This is a big deal, a really big deal, because the business record sections of the Patriot Act were designed for specific investigations against specific individuals. I would see nothing wrong with targeting the phone records of somebody who is suspected of terrorism, but everybody who either sent or received a call from a Verizon phone and maybe the other cell phone providers, that was never the intent of the business records section. The business records section is set to expire in 2015, and I want to find out why they decided to have such a broad brush to bring in everybody. And if we have to amend the Patriot Act before 2015 to stop this from happening, I am all for doing that, and I'm the author of the act.
So that's Jim Sensenbrenner. So this is a big deal. This is not the intention of that section of the Patriot Act. This is an overstep. It's a gross overreach. We've got to call this back. Now, here's James Clapper. He is the Director of National Intelligence, DNI. So this is the intelligence guy. James Clapper is his name. And he was asked by Ron Wyden. Ron Wyden sits on the Senate Intelligence Committee. And Ron Wyden, and there's another Democrat whose name escapes me at the moment, they have been concerned about these privacy issues for months now. They've been asking questions for months, a couple of Democrats. They smell something funny here, smell something fishy. They've been pushing, they've been probing, they've been prodding. And here's Ron Wyden talking to James Clapper. This is March 12th. Now realize all this stuff was going on. James Clapper knew all this stuff was going on March 12th. He knew that the NSA was collecting data on every telephone transmission in the country. He knew that the NSA was monitoring Google and monitoring Microsoft and monitoring Skype and monitoring YouTube. He knew that they were monitoring credit card transactions. He knew that they were doing this. And so you listen to what he says when Ron Wyden asks him about this issue on March 12. Let's listen.
Just one, Madam Chair, and I thank you. And this for you, Director Clapper, again on the surveillance front. And I hope we can do this in just a yes or no answer, because I know Senator Feinstein wants to move on. Last summer, the NSA director was at a conference, and he was asked a question about the NSA surveillance of Americans. He replied, and I quote here, "The story that we have millions or hundreds of millions of dossiers on people is completely false." The reason I'm asking the question is, having served on the committee now for a dozen years, I don't really know what a dossier is in this context. So what I wanted to see is if you could give me a yes or no answer to the question, does the NSA collect any type of data at all on millions or hundreds of millions of Americans?
No, sir.
That's a lie.
It does not.
That's perjury.
Not wittingly. There are cases where they could inadvertently, perhaps, collect, but not wittingly.
Not wittingly. They issued a memo yesterday, the same guy, James Clapper, we do not intentionally target. Think about that, intentionally target. So he's implying that if it's unintentional, we can target people as long as we don't intend to do it. Well, how can you target somebody if you don't intend to do it? I mean, it's just gibberish. Intentionally target? I mean, the word target implies intentionality. So he's creating this some kind of massive giant loophole. Well, it's all unintentional. That was just all one big giant mistake. The fact that we got hundreds of millions of phone records, that was just inadvertent. That was just a slip. That's a mistake. Could have happened to anybody. Now here is Senator Mark Kirk from Illinois talking to Eric Holder at a Capitol Hill hearing on June 6th. This is Mark Kirk asking Eric Holder, are you spying on Congress?
Could you assure to us that no phones inside the Capitol were monitored of members of Congress that would give a future executive branch, if they started pulling this kind of thing off, would give them unique leverage over the legislature?
With all due respect, Senator, I don't think this is an appropriate setting for me to discuss that issue. I'd be more than glad to come back in an appropriate setting to discuss the issues that you have raised, but in this open forum, I would
interrupt you and say the correct answer would be say no. We stayed within our lane, and I'm assuring you, we did not spy on members of Congress.
And Eric Holder couldn't say that. He could not say, no, we have not spied on you. So here is Obamagate. Eric Holder essentially admitting that Obama is spying on the members of Congress. So let's go to the phones. Let's go to Jeff, Hampton, Illinois. If we can bring Jeff in. Jeff, welcome to Focal Point with Brian Fisher. What's on your mind?
Hey, just want to say something real quick. On an earlier program, they played a news conference that the president did talking about the telephone oversight that, or whatever you would call it, I guess that's a polite way of saying that, the spy thing where they're checking everybody's phone calls out. And the president went on to say that, well, we're really only doing this to take care of terrorists, and we don't look at the content of the call until we decide that's a terrorist, and then we go get a subpoena. And I guess I want to stop and remind everybody that remember how the president defines the word terrorist. First of all, he's defining terrorist as anyone who is a returning veteran, a Christian, a pro-lifer, etc.
Yeah, that's a good point.
He's not defining terrorist as someone from the Middle East who's between the ages of 15 and 35 years of age, male typically. That's not his definition of terrorist. The other thing is, then he said, well, we have to go to, then once we after all these hoops, we have to go to a judge and get a subpoena. Well, remember, too, that he shopped judges to get the subpoenas to check on the media. So, I mean, basically, the entire news conference was, is there a polite way to say a lie? Thanks.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that, and that's an insightful observation, especially about who President Obama considers to be the threats. I mean, it's us. And besides, President Obama is the one that said the war on terror is over. It's just all a bunch of little renegade groups out there. The war on terror is over. Al-Qaeda's on the run. We've decimated Al-Qaeda. Then so who is left for him to spy on? If he's saying the war on terror is over, we got nothing to worry about from Muslims anymore. Who do we have to worry about? Well, it's the evangelical Christians. That's a very, very good point, and that could be his rationale for domestic spying. Focal Point AFR Talk back with Steve Lonigan, New Jersey, in a moment. Stay with us.